But now we're going to turn to a conversation with Amy Godine, author of the new book, The Black Woods, which reveals the relatively unknown story of Black pioneers in the Adirondacks. The story focuses on Gerrit Smith, an upstate abolitionist in the mid-1800s. And here is Amy Godine's interview with my Capitol colleague, Dan Clark.
Amy, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
I am so glad to be here. Thank you.
Of course, anytime. So this is just such an interesting book, and I think it's an interesting area that a lot of people don't know about and have never looked into.
Mm-hmm.
And you have 500 pages, including appendices, of just research and this story that a lot of people wouldn't know about. At the same time, this is a time in New York history that kind of conflicted a little bit, where you have this movement of Black people being donated this land to go into the Adirondacks, but you also have pro-slavery interests in New York. This was the 1840s, 50s, around that time. Did you feel that tension while you were writing it, of these kind of opposing forces?
Well, the opposing forces really are what gave rise to the idea for Gerrit Smith's giveaway in the first place. He could see that at the Constitutional Convention in New York in 1846, pro-slavery interests would dominate and call the shots. And once again, there would be a 25-year-old voter restriction imposed on Black men alone because of business interests in good part that wanted to favor pro-slavery concerns in the South.
It's such an interesting part of the story, because when I was reading the preface of the book, that didn't pop out immediately, but when it did come there in the book, I thought that was so interesting. And that's just a small part of this very larger story that you've written. And I want you to describe in your own words what you see what this book is about. Oh,
it's about Gerrit Smith himself, who gave the land away, 120,000 acres to 3,000 Black New Yorkers in 1846 and 7. He called it a scheme of justice and benevolence, and that was aptly named. His idea was to even the playing field and favor very poor Black men, mostly from metropolitan New York, with gifts of land in the Adirondacks, which, if they worked them and brought them up to value, could meet the property restriction requirement in order to vote. If they couldn't vote, they couldn't express anti-slavery sentiments, they couldn't expect representation of their concerns. Politically, they were invisible, they were mute. So this was a way to gain Black New York a voice.
Which is such like when I heard about this book first, I thought it was just about this kind of like settlement movement into the Adirondacks. And to see this political kind of like inspiration behind it was so interesting to me, that there were so many different layers as to what was happening around that time.
That's the part of the story we didn't see coming when I started to first research it. I thought it was just a settlement story, and a very small story at that. When I dug into what inspired Smith and all of the Black reformers who came on board to help him with this effort, it was a political story, and it was a story of Black enfranchisement and Black empowerment and Black property ownership, all of those things.
You know, the irony of you and I, two white people, talking about this very deep Black history in the Adirondacks is not lost on me. How did you balance that while you were writing the book about this Black history? You know, how did you approach that?
I assured myself that history changes every minute, and even before my book went to the press, I was learning things I wished I had included. Whatever I write will be superseded very quickly by other voices bringing their own singular perspectives to this, and that's going to include many more Black voices that have taken this up before, and I'm excited for that displacement. I hope it doesn't happen in a year. I hope I get 10 or more out of my book, but I can see this coming, absolutely. Yeah, I welcome it.
Yeah, to be honest with you, your book is kind of one of the first of its kind. And it's exciting for me to think that you're right, that this will inspire more and more research into this, and we can find out more and more about this rich history in the Adirondacks that we just don't know all that much about. But you write in the preface of the book that the research was going to be quite a hurdle to overcome, because that being so long ago, there isn't a lot of tangible evidence.
There's nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
There's Zippo.
So how did you start?
You go to paper. I mean, you look on the ground. There's no material culture left on the ground. There are no cabins. There are no barns. There are hardly walls. You can maybe see some sinkholes which may or may not have belonged to the grantees, because most of the grantees who came, and not many didn't settle on the land they were given. Like all Adirondackers who go up there and look at land, they move to better land as soon as they can find it. So they did that too. So I went to the archival records and to Smith's correspondence, which was enormous, and to tax records, legal documents, poll lists, school records, military pension files, a huge source of information, tax rolls down in New York State archives that described relations between black and white neighbors, and that was a world of information.
One thing that I had a question about is the eligibility that we were talking about before we started recording. So as we've talked about during this interview, Gerrit Smith donated this land to 3,000 black New Yorkers to possibly come settle. How are they chosen? Because there must have been more than 3,000 people.
Well, yeah, you bet. He had a huge network in the black reform activist community in New York, mostly in cities, and among white abolitionists too. And he picked 13 reformers, white and black, most of them black, to help him pick eligible grantees. He had strict rules of eligibility, which they shared, and they were evident poverty, landlessness, physical fitness. To do this, they had to be between 20 and 60, good character, and temperance abiding ethic. So they did not drink. No drinking was allowed. That was a sticking point for many potential grantees who did resent being told how to live and didn't want this stricture imposing on their life, whether or not they partook of gin or whatever. Yeah.
Well, you write about how, I don't know about most, but a lot of the grantees didn't actually come up to the Adirondacks and settle. They
hardly
had the
any did.
Exactly. They had the land deed, but they never actually went up. Why was that? Was it because of rules and eligibility like that, or?
That's a really good question. There are several theories about that. I'll give you two, and then I'll give you mine. Sure. The first one that historians promoted was, and both these theories are racialized. One is that they had to be fugitives because Gerrit Smith had such intimate dealings with fugitive interest, helping people self-emancipate, buying the freedom of slaves he met in Washington, building an anti-slavery political party, the Liberty Party in New York, and that's how people knew him, the friend of the slave. And those historians said that the grantees who came up, being ex-slaves, being Southern, lacked the capacity to handle the cold. They were used to the sunny South, and they couldn't hack it up here. They were African, and they were used to full-bore sun all the time, and they couldn't manage the weather. The historians who did a little more research and realized that Smith actually was giving land to black New Yorkers, blamed it on their city habits of soft living in jobs like barbering or tailoring or waiting tables, and that they were unfitted for the rigors of the Adirondack wilderness for that reason. They didn't have the job skills, they didn't have the strength or the planning foresight, and both explanations underscored black incapacity and unfittedness to the region, which is an important point in its own right that will last forever in Adirondack history, the idea of who belongs and who doesn't to the region. My reasoning is a little more simple. I look at what agricultural historians have told us about what it cost to move to the frontier at mid-19th century. It cost $1,500. These grantees didn't have anything close to that kind of money. Neither did poor white laborers, for that matter, and they couldn't afford the move. It was simply beyond their means. If they'd had that kind of money, they wouldn't have been eligible for this gift of land in the first place. So Smith grievously misunderstood the depth of black poverty at this time, and that was a fatal mistake.
So I don't want to spoil the entire book for our audience because I think there is a lot in there for them to explore. But
sure.
A name that kept popping up again and again as I was kind of flipping through your book is Frederick Douglass. Tell me how he plays into this. I mean, that's a very important character in American history.
It is, and he was all in at the beginning. When he moved to New York from Boston, he moves to Rochester, and Gerrit Smith, who really admires his oratory, his politics, and his vision, and they're completely on board with abolitionism as soon as possible, gives him a grant of land to welcome him to New York State. Douglass is delighted, and he's started this new newspaper. He starts to support this very strongly in the paper, urging the grantees to move, setting them up with a surveyor who turns out not to be so great, but that's another story. And then getting anxious when the exodus doesn't occur and pointing out that they need money, they need help. But he doesn't, it seems to me, approach Gerrit Smith directly and say, can you help them at this point with money gifts as well as land? They can't make that next hurdle if they aren't capitalized at the outset. And by a few years in, he's disavowed black farming completely and says in a letter, for whatever reason, black city people are just not interested in farming. And so I don't support a full-bore farming effort of any kind. So he backs away, which is the last thing the grantees on the frontier, I'm sure, want to read in their favorite newspaper, is their best champion sort of cutting them off.
It's such an interesting story, and I love it even more because it's part of our state's history.
Me too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love New York. Amy Godine, author of The Black Woods from Cornell University Press. Thank you so much.
Thank you.